invite Dr. Nalini Shah, Madam, for the her session. And she's a professor and head of Department of Endocrinology, prestigious KEM Hospital, Mumbai. She's true academician, and there are lots of gold medals in her credit. She's all trained in pediatric endocrinology also, and very renowned name in the field of endocrinology. These are the very few credits mentioned over here, and she has more than 244 publication in various international journals. Over to Dr. Nalini, madam.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is my first interaction with physicians of Rajkot, and I'm truly grateful for this particular opportunity. Thank you, Mayank Bhai. Thank you, Gunjan Joshi, Pankaj Bhai, and Nilesh Datrusha, with whom I've been closely associated for this particular meeting and its content and planning. I think when you have spent a lifetime in a department and an institution like KM Hospital, you start understanding the value of all the clinical wealth that you acquire over a period of time and the sheer kind of learning that emerges from it. So what I propose to do over here is just put together a few cases to bring home very simple, small messages, because at the end of the day, I truly believe that the physicians have a great task and a very difficult task, that too. From morning, we've been watching its cardiology, its neurology, its Cushing's syndrome, its hypopituitarism, and now we're talking about endocrine causes for hypertension. So why is it that we should really be aware of it, and why should we really know about it? Well, let's just look at this question being answered by this particular case. He's a very young boy, 13 years old, a very simple problem. There's an ingrowing toenail, and he's being taken up on the table for just removal of this under local anesthesia. The staff nurse on the duty in the theater, she just happens to take the blood pressure of this child. This patient comes from a family with a wealth of a medical background, actually. So the staff nurse, when she took the blood pressure was on the higher side for this child. And there was a little surprise element that was perceived, and the surgical part of the story was deferred, and patient was just treated conservatively for the ingrowing toenail. But that started the whole process of consultations rolling. It was a cardiology consultation, nephrology consultation, which kind of drew negativity. And then the patient was referred to another sort of medical caregiver, when it was concluded there is a part of a metabolic syndrome related to weight gain. That's how the patient had been referred to us, whether it was a metabolic syndrome related to so-called essential hypertension in a 13-year-old. And one would consider this being questionable, because in a younger individual, one would need to think minimum other causes for secondary hypertension. Having said that, even in an adult, and that too in an adult with difficult to control blood pressure, or blood pressure requiring multitudes of drugs in different class of molecules, are patients who are absolutely meritorious of finding out what if there is an underlying etiology which is beyond essential hypertension, because this would be definitely actionable. Sometimes it could even have curative intent, and patient may not require medical management for it. So surely this patient cannot be denied this particular opportunity. Well, we do realize that the hypertension, something when we are talking about 1 out of 4 individual in adult population which is going to be hypertensive. We do not want to use tests randomly for these patients, and you do appreciate the fact that the endocrine test could be sort of pretty involved battery of investigations. It may not be difficult to order, but the numbers which are generated by the results of it do require due diligence to interpret them and take them forward towards actions if at all they're attached to it. So are there any who are the people who have secondary hypertension amongst these group of very commonly involved population, which is 25 to 30% of adult population. Secondary hypertension forms 10, not more than 15% of all the hypertensive individual that we talk about. And the commonest reason for that is a renal in origin. It's either renovascular or it's a renal parenchymal disorder which produces secondary hypertension. If that is ruled out, and it should be addressed first, only then we talk about endocrine causes for secondary hypertension. We do not talk about secondary hypertension in any background of patient before ruling out renal causes for hypertension. Practically every disorder in endocrinology is associated with hypertension. You talk about pituitary disorders, you talk about thyroid disorders, parathyroid disorders, pancreatic disorders, adrenal disorders, gonadal disorders, everything can have associated component of hypertension. But the difference over there is the presentation and the phenotype of these individuals is not for hypertension or its complications, is other associated symptom complex which brings the patients to you. We are talking about those patients where the phenotype is very subtle and it's just hypertension that you're trying to address and try to figure out which of these patients are meritorious of being investigated for secondary causes of hypertension. In those group of individuals, it is the adrenal as a seat of etiology becomes extremely pertinent because the phenotype of most of adrenal disorders, especially in a subtle form, can be only hypertension and its associated parameters of problem. Adrenal gland has myriad of enzymes through which it produces multiple hormones. We as endocrinologists love to work with all these enzymes and the different products which are intermediary products. I really don't think we need to delve into any of these. I'm going to keep it extraordinarily simple, and all that we need to understand is there are 4 different types of hormones which are produced by adrenal gland. This is related to salt control, sugar control, sex hormone control, and stress hormone control from different layers of adrenal gland. So these are the 4 basic hormone related production that we talk about, which is aldosterone mediated, aldosterone mimic, which produce hypertension, and pheochromocytoma. Gonadal sex steroid related hypertension is also known and part of adrenal pathology, and I will be eliciting that through a case capsule. So when we talk about aldosterone and salt hormone related control, which is executed by aldosterone and so on amongst each of the layers of endocrinology, all of them have some additional subtle phenotype which needs to be elicited and which needs to be thought about, and only then are you really justified in asking for the relevant investigations. It's not really correct to ask for adrenal battery of investigations because it just opens up a big Pandora's box which becomes very, very difficult to interpret as a test results. And I think one needs to justify what investigations we are doing and how are they going to be actionable when the results are available to us. So when we talk about hypertension, which is originating from the adrenal gland, one should just simply think of the underlying physiology which has gone wrong. And the reason of understanding that is what is going to govern the patient's presentation, and that is also going to govern your investigations and their results. And not to mention the fact the management is going to depend completely on that. So anything which is aldosterone or controlling salt and the volume in the body is going to be reflected with low renin state. That is the basic physiology. anything which is pushing up the level of aldosterone and increasing the intravascular volume, renin has to go down. And we are all aware of that. Versus that are the states of different renin levels, which could be normal or elevated, and that comes from different set of pathology that we want to discuss with you. Let's talk about medulla and pheochromocytoma as a first port of call, because that's one of the lesser common as an etiological factor, but one of the most dramatic presentation, where unless it is captured or unless it is thought about, patient can present with acute catastrophe. Here is a 13-year-old child again, and mind you, this child is just a representative fact. Pheochromocytoma can present even at 70-year-old adult. This is a 13-year-old boy who just always talked about pain in abdomen, and everybody thought he was sort of whatever. It was not given due diligence or due importance to it. Till one fine day, he came down with one of the emergencies. And then what was really done by the physician who was in charge, because of the pain in abdomen, there was an ultrasound of abdomen which was done. The ultrasound suggested there was a mass in the adrenal gland. With this mass, which was visible, now the blood pressure was checked, because nobody really routinely checks, which is rather unfortunate that in a 13-year-old also the blood pressure is very, very relevant and very important. His blood pressure was extraordinarily high. This patient had presented with flash pulmonary edema. And that was because his hypertension, which was present for a few months, was completely ignored, not really looked into, never measured, and he presented with hypertensive urgency. With this hypertension and adrenal mass, the next set of things that was done as a thought process towards picking up pheochromocytoma, the relevant tests were ordered, patient was prepared, patient was subjected to surgery, and it was completely cured of hypertension. That is a beauty of understanding, and that is a beauty of thinking of the relevant test to carry out a possible pathology being picked up, which is curative for hypertension. When we talk about the test parameters which should be used for the diagnosis of pheochromocytoma, if there is one single message that I've left behind in this particular talk, ladies and gentlemen, please do not ever order urinary VMA or catecholamine in any form. Urinary catecholamines, plasma catecholamines, please never order that particular test. The only test that you should order is metanephrines, which is a derivative of catecholamines, and depending upon availability, and I think it's now available practically everywhere, please prefer to do plasma-free metanephrines. It's plural, it's not singular. Metanephrines should be ordered. Should you run into difficulty or there is non-availability, order for urinary metanephrines. Beyond metanephrines, do not order any test for a suspected case of pheochromocytoma, because the accuracy of the results changes considerably. Plasma-free metanephrine is very sensitive and very specific, which is what we want in a very serious state of diagnosis like pheochromocytoma. Pheochromocytoma also has an extremely good radiological diagnosis, and your radiological colleague should be able to pick it up should they ever come across an adrenal mass. And we have learned it a very, very hard way that all the radiological features should be elicited and understood by the primary care physicians. It should not be left to the radiologist at all, because unfortunately, they do not have the complete loop of information which is available to them, and they can default in the diagnosis being raised in these group of individuals. With our own hard work, this is the published data from the department. Pheochromocytoma has a very characteristic radiology, and radiologically you can make diagnosis of pheochromocytoma. Do not get scared of pheochromocytoma. It doesn't have very elaborate preoperative management also. This is our own, again, published work where we simplified the preoperative management with just amlodipine, and you work with a good anesthesiologist, and the results throughout the surgery and in the post-operative period are very, very comfortable. Also, do not ignore the fact that we require in a pheochromocytoma genetics to be done, because there are many ramifications of this disorder which allow it to be yielded and visualized by having the genetic result in these patients. Do not leave the patient after surgically curing them, because the story is not yet over, is what we need to remember. Also understand that the aldosterone and its impact towards salt and the intravascular volume producing hypertension is something which is extremely common, much more common than actually pheochromocytoma. It doesn't have the magic of urgency and medical emergencies like what you see in pheochromocytoma, barring very, very few patients. And it could be because of high aldosterone, or it could be like aldosterone action related hormones. And these are what we call as mineralocorticoid mimics, which comes from other group of hormones, and these group of hormones come when there are multiple enzyme related defect. What does it mean actually to you as a physician and to us as a physician? How do we even think about it? Look at this case. She's an 18-year-old, very, very typical, something which was labeled as polycystic ovarian syndrome, and we all respect the fact this is pretty common. Young individual, irregular menstrual cycles, hirsutism, weight gain, and so on. Well, what really threw us out and what really upset us in this case was our testosterone level. This is a very common test that you have as a result. 1.7 of testosterone and an androstenedione of 26 nanogram is something which kind of really makes you stand up from your chair. And actually what this girl had was a congenital defect somewhere along the path of cortisol synthesis, which was giving her all these parameters of issues and problems. So what is a big deal that we've achieved by making this diagnosis? Well, you make a difference in managing this patient. You make a difference in a future different social aspects like a fertility, like a pregnancy planning, like a marriage also, whom she should marry, what will happen to her children. There are so many ramifications attached to this diagnosis that we really don't want to miss them, not to mention the fact that even her siblings could be having the same problem without having medical symptoms attached to it, and that brings it very, very important to make the diagnosis. Look at the second example of it. Two sisters come with primary amenorrhea. Now, the question to me would be from all of you, we as physicians, why are we looking at amenorrhea? It should be going to gynecologist. Well, there was a background additional problem with this amenorrhea. One of the sister used to get hypokalemic periodic paralysis. And unfortunately, again, the paralysis would be treated in emergency, but the blood pressure was ignored in these individuals. She was a hypertensive, hypokalemic periodic paralysis who presented with primary amenorrhea. And when we realized this, what was absolutely important to understand and respect is, again, these are two sisters who are born with a particular enzyme defect, which leads to a set of mineralocorticoid-like activities which are exaggerated in these patients, which produces hypertension, hypokalemia, which is the presentation, but actually there is much more attached to it. I need not go into the detail, but the reason why this comes into our armamentarium as physician is because this is a cause for secondary hypertension. And let me also tell you that these are 46XY, and that you can imagine is the whole ramification of the story sort of is compounded by understanding the completeness of the picture. Cortisol is also a great mimic of mineralocorticoid action. Chaitanya went through the whole battery of Cushing's syndrome. One of the things that the cortisol does is it produces very, very bad hypertension, which is exactly through the receptor of mineralocorticoid. So it increases intravascular volume. It can lead to hypokalemia, and it can lead to serious set of blood pressure related concern in these individuals. But it entirely depends on the spectrum. You can have a very mild Cushing's syndrome where nobody's even thought about it to seek medical attention, or you can have severe catastrophic presentation of Cushing syndrome. And I think by working in an institution like KEM, which has got primary interest in adrenal disorders, the whole spectrum of Cushing syndrome is something which is always a learning curve. And coming back to our case, what we realized in this patient is that there was a very subtle weight gain that he had gone through. The parents who came from a medical background did not feel that the weight gain was so important to seek medical attention. But to us, there was a little rounding of the faces, there's a little change in the color of his skin, and we thought that he possibly had Cushing's syndrome, and we had to go through investigations for the same. Amongst all the tests that we discussed in the morning for Cushing's syndrome, we have to respect the fact that we are sitting in a busy OPD. As a physician, some of you may be seeing 100 patients per day, and you cannot go through a battery of investigations to make a diagnosis of Cushing's syndrome. We have learned it the hard way, and again through our published data, one single test which should be done in a suspected case of Cushing's syndrome is an OPD basis of overnight dexamethasone suppression test. It's a simple serum cortisol estimation by giving previous night 2 tablets of dexamethasone 1 milligram, and you should be able to exclude a possibility of Cushing's syndrome with an accuracy of 98%. Ladies and gentlemen, in an outdoor practice, that test is good enough to work with, and that's what I would recommend in a suspected case of Cushing's syndrome. And I would be generous with this test. I would do it if I clinically suspect it, because it is truly horrendous to miss a case of Cushing's syndrome and allow the patient to sort of be with the ongoing pathology and its complications. This patient had a pituitary microadenoma, which required to be operated, and he was, of course, cured of his hypertension. The story in a younger child with Cushing's syndrome continues much after that, but that's not the focus of our attention today. Cushing can come from multiple referrals, including gynecology, where they go for primary infertility, like this lady. I'll stop in 2 minutes. So,
We have 2 minutes because this is the 2-minute alert bell. We have 2 minutes.
how many minutes?
2 minutes.
2 minutes, okay. So if I talk about aldosterone as a pathology, that is one thing that I want to tell about in next 2 minutes, which is available to me. Aldosterone and its pathology is a commonest cause for secondary hypertension, and what we need to appreciate and remember is that it has no phenotype. It need not have any additional pathology of symptom complex which is attached to it. Of course, you can have a very dramatic presentation like this young lady who has hypertension, hypokalemia, comes with paralysis, and we make a diagnosis. But that's a very small number of aldosterone-related pathology. Most of this pathology is not one single nodule. It could be multiple nodules, or it could be a part of hyperplasia with nodules, which essentially means that these patients may not have a surgically correctable cause for it. It still becomes extremely important to appreciate and find out if there is an underlying aldosterone-related pathology, and how do we do it, and in which patients should we do it. Every patient of hypertension which is beyond stage 2 of hypertension is meritorious of one single test, and that is plasma renin activity. Now this test is substituted by a very easy to do test, which is done on automated machine, which is direct renin concentration. And that is really important because it can allow you, just like your TSH, to tell you whether or not there is a thyroid problem. It can tell you whether or not there is an aldosterone axis which is involvement. So why is it so important to not miss aldosterone related pathology? Because at the end of the day, you're telling me there is no other phenotype which is attached to it beyond hypertension, and I'm already controlling hypertension in any patient with hypertension. Well, you will be able to possibly add a medical arm of management to these. Let me not go through these capsules again. You may be able to add a medical change in management of these individuals and use specific drugs to manage mineralocorticoid excess syndrome. The commonest of that is spironolactone or eplerenone. Right? In males, we get a little worried about using spironolactone, and you may consider using eplerenone. These are specific drugs which target mineralocorticoid mediated hypertension. It gives you better control of hypertension. It allows better monitoring of hypertension, because these group of hypertensions are beyond just routine hypertension. Even when you control the hypertension, the aldosterone which is remaining in excess in these group of individuals will still have additional onload of cardiac complications, and that is the reason why we want to find them out, and that is the reason why we want to respect and find out adrenal pathologies in endocrinology, because many of them will allow you curative intent of controlling these patients with hypertension. Ladies and gentlemen, in a department like KEM, when you work with wonderful team members and superb postgraduates, you continue to learn endocrinology. Thank you very much for your attention.